Hello there. My name is Timothy, and this is Tim and Tom's Film Nights, our weekly podcast where we sit down, pop some popcorn, and watch a film together, debating, discussing, and occasionally disagreeing on every aspect of it. I'm joined tonight by my longtime friend and co-host Thomas, who is currently painting the walls with his enthusiasm. Aren't you, Thomas?
Oh, Timothy, dearest, it's always a pleasure to be here with you. Despite your insistence on wearing those hideous sweater vests every bloody week. But enough about my fashion choices. What have we got for us tonight?
Well, Tom, dear chap, tonight's film is a true classic in the horror genre. A film that has stood the test of time and still manages to terrify audiences even today. It's the Texas Chain Saw Massacre.
Oh, Timothy, my dear old chap, I bloody love this one. One of the best slasher films ever made, in my not at all biased opinion, of course.
Well, you know me, Tom. I'm more of a historical drama type of fellow, but I will give the old girl a chance. Won't I?
Ah, Timothy, dearest, you're in for a treat tonight. The Texas Chain Saw Massacre follows a group of young friends who decide to head out on a road trip to visit their grandfather's old farmhouse. As they drive through the desolate Texas countryside, they pick up a hitchhiker named the Hitcher, who turns out to be a psychopathic killer with a penchant for chainsaws. The group eventually reaches their destination, but soon discover that something is deeply wrong. They find animal parts strewn everywhere and hear eerie noises coming from the basement. As they investigate, they uncover an even more sinister secret. Their grandfather was a mad scientist who experimented with genetic engineering, accidentally creating a mutated human-pig hybrid that's been terrorizing the area. The remaining survivors band together to fend off the monster and escape the farmhouse before it's too late. Throughout the film, there are plenty of jump scares, gore, and nail-biting suspense that will have you on the edge of your seat now. Timothy, my old chap, what did you think about the plot? Any particular scenes that stuck out to you?
Well, Tom, dear chap, I must say that it sounds interesting. I mean, I'm more of a historical drama type myself, but I do admit that the premise is quite unique. But let's move on to some interesting trivia about the Texas Chain Saw Massacre, shall we?
Oh, Timothy, dearest, I adore trivia. So, did you know that the iconic chainsaw sound effect used in the film was actually recorded by the film's producer, Robert E. Bob, not his real name, of course, who revved up a saw and then slowed down the recording to create the legendary low-pitched growl.
Speaking of trivia, Thomas, dear chap, did you know that director, Tobe Hooper, originally wanted to use real animal parts for some scenes, but was forced to use fake ones due to budget constraints? The fake pig's head used in the infamous opening scene cost only $10 at a local supermarket.
Oh, Timothy, dearest, that's priceless. Now, let's move on to some behind-the-scenes trivia. Did you know that the iconic blood-splattered wall in the film was actually just painted by the set designers? It looks so realistic that many people still believe it's real blood.
I can't believe it, Tom, dear chap. And speaking of realism, did you know that the famous scene where the camera zooms in on a close-up of the chainsaw blade? Well, according to legend, director Tobe Hooper actually cut off his own finger during filming and insisted on using the real blood for added authenticity.
Ouch! That's dedication, Tim, dearest. Now, let's move on to the soundtrack, which is equally iconic. Did you know that the famous Cha-Cha theme was actually composed by a talented Italian composer named Jerry Giacinto, who sadly passed away just 2 years after the film's release?
Well, Tom, dear chap, I must admit, despite my initial reservations about this horror flick, as you so eloquently put it, I have to give credit where credit is due. The Texas Chain Saw Massacre has certainly left an indelible mark on the horror genre and popular culture in general.
And, that's why it's considered one of the best slasher films ever made, Tim, dearest. Now, I'm dying to hear what you thought about the film's soundtrack. Did it manage to evoke any strong emotions in you, like fear for your life, perhaps?
Well, Thomas, dear chap, I must admit that while I am not typically a fan of horror films, the soundtrack did manage to evoke some strong emotions within me. The famous Cha-Cha theme, composed by Jerry Giacinto, is quite memorable and certainly adds to the overall eerie atmosphere of the film. I especially enjoyed the use of low-pitched strings and percussion instruments throughout, which together create a sense of aim, unease, and dread that perfectly complements the on-screen events. However, as someone who generally prefers classical music or perhaps some gentle jazz, I must confess that the soundtrack's relentless intensity did eventually become somewhat wearing on my nerves, if you know what I mean.
Oh, Tim, dearest, I do. And, that's exactly the point of a good horror score. It should make your skin crawl and your heart race, leaving you on edge until the very end. Speaking of, the soundtrack, did you know that some fans have even created an entire album called the Texas Chain Saw Massacre? Music from the motion picture, which features the original score by Giacinto and a few unused tracks. It's quite an interesting listen if you ever find yourself in the mood for some more chainsaw-infused terror.
Well, Tom, dear chap, I must admit that while I don't have any immediate plans to listen to said album, it does showcase the enduring popularity of the film and its soundtrack. So, in conclusion, while the Texas Chain Saw Massacre isn't exactly my cup of Earl Grey tea, I can see why it's considered a classic in the horror genre. Its chilling atmosphere, iconic characters, and haunting score all come together to create an unforgettable cinematic experience that will certainly keep audiences on edge for years to come.
Oh, Tim, dearest, I couldn't have said it better myself. Now let's move on to the next topic, shall we? What do you think about the performances of the actors and their respective characters in the Texas Chain Saw Massacre?
Well, Tom, dear chap, I must say that the performances in the Texas Chain Saw Massacre are truly commendable. All of the actors managed to bring their characters to life with a convincing mix of fear and desperation. The film star, Marilyn Burns, who plays the protagonist, final girl Sally Hardesty, is especially notable for her portrayal of a strong and resourceful young woman who refuses to succumb to terror despite being hunted by a chainsaw-wielding psychopath. Her performance resonates with audiences even today, due in part to how relatable she feels as a character.
Tim, dearest, I couldn't agree more. But let us not forget about the other actors who bring life to this gruesome masterpiece. John Dugan plays the iconic Grandpa, or the Hitcher, a deranged killer with a chainsaw for a hand who will stop at nothing to satisfy his bloodlust. His performance is both menacing and, oddly charismatic, making him all the more terrifying.
Indeed, Tom, dear chap, Dugan's portrayal of Grandpa is truly chilling. But let us not forget about Jim, the Chainsaw Man, as Leatherface, who wears a mask made of human skin and wields a chainsaw with deadly precision. His performance is equal parts brutal and sadistic, creating an image of pure evil that has become synonymous with the film itself.
Oh, Tim, dearest, you speak of the great Jim, the Chainsaw Man, with such reverence. But let us not forget about our beloved Dinner Bell, played by the talented and enigmatic Edwin Neal. His performance as the mentally unstable but ultimately sympathetic character, who rings a dinner bell to lure his victims into a trap, adds an element of pathos to what otherwise would be a purely shock-driven experience.
Tom, dearest, you're right. Of course, Neal's portrayal of Dinner Bell is truly masterful in its own way. And let us not forget about the rest of the cast, who all contribute to creating a vivid and unforgettable world filled with terror and suspense. The performances in the Texas Chain Saw Massacre are truly a testament to the talent and dedication of the actors involved.
Indeed, Tim, dearest, indeed. Now let us move on to our next topic, shall we? In your opinion, Tim, dearest, how has the Texas Chain Saw Massacre influenced other films in the horror genre?
Well, Tom, dear chap, I must say that the Texas Chain Saw Massacre has had a profound impact on the horror genre as a whole. Many films and television series have been influenced by its grimy, realistic approach to terror, creating an entire subgenre known as splatter film. Films such as The Hills Have Eyes, The Texas Chain Saw Massacre 2, and even the modern classic The Blair Witch Project all owe a debt of gratitude to Hooper's masterpiece.
Oh, Tim, dearest, I couldn't agree more. But let us not forget about the films that were directly influenced by the Texas Chain Saw Massacre itself. Take, for example, Tobe Hooper's own film, Eaten Alive, which features a chainsaw-wielding maniac known as the Creeper, who terrorizes a group of, campers at a remote swamp motel. Or perhaps we could also mention Wes Craven's classic The Hills Have Eyes, which follows a family on a road trip who are brutalized by a cannibalistic clan living in the Nevada desert.
Thomas, dear chap, you speak of these films with such admiration, but let us not forget about the lesser-known gems that were also influenced by Hooper's masterpiece. For example, there's the Italian horror film, The New York Ripper, which follows a masked killer who stalks and murders women in New York City with various weapons, including, you guessed it, a chainsaw. Or perhaps we could mention the Spanish slasher film, The Flesh Eater, which features a similar set of characters trapped in a remote cabin while being stalked by an insane killer wielding a chainsaw.
Oh, Tim, dearest, you speak of these films with such passion, but let us not forget about the television series that were also influenced by the Texas Chain Saw Massacre. Take, for example, the classic anthology show, Tales from the Crypt, which featured several episodes inspired by Hooper's film, including The New Neighbors and You Vicious Cycle. Or perhaps we could mention the short-lived but, beloved cult favorite, Freddy's Nightmares. A Nightmare on Elm Street, which featured several episodes that pay homage to the Texas Chain Saw Massacre, including The End of the World and Freddy's Yard Sale.
Tom, dear chap, you speak of these shows with such fondness, but let us not forget about the modern films and television series that have also been influenced by the Texas Chain Saw Massacre. For example, there's the critically acclaimed horror film, The Green Room, which follows a punk rock band trapped in a remote Oregon bar owned by a deranged group of neo-Nazis who are also avid fans of Hooper's film. Or perhaps we could mention the popular television series, Hannibal, which features numerous homages to the Texas Chain Saw Massacre throughout its 3 seasons, including a memorable scene where character Dr. Frederick Chilton is decapitated with an electric chainsaw, mirroring Grandpa's fate in Hooper's film.
Oh, Tim, dearest, you speak of these modern interpretations with such reverence. But let us not forget about the enduring legacy of the Texas Chain Saw Massacre itself. Its influence can still be felt today in countless horror films and television, series that continue to push boundaries and terrify audiences worldwide. It is truly a timeless masterpiece that has left an indelible mark on the genre and popular culture as a whole.
Tom, dear chap, I couldn't agree more. Now let us move on to our next topic, shall we? What do you think about the influence of the Texas Chain Saw Massacre on other media such as literature or music?
Oh, Tim, dearest, you're right. The Texas Chain Saw Massacre has indeed left an indelible mark on other media as well. For example, there have been numerous novels and short stories inspired by Hooper's masterpiece. One notable example is the best-selling horror novel, The Texas Chain Saw Massacre. The first cut, written by Stephen King's son, Joe Hill. The book delves into the twisted minds of the characters and provides a gruesome glimpse into the events leading up to the film's iconic opening scene. As for music, there have been countless bands and artists who have been inspired by the film's grimy, visceral horror. One notable example is the Swedish death metal band, the Texas Chain Saw Massacre, which formed in the late 80s and has since released numerous albums with lyrics inspired by the film. Their song, The Sawyer's Family, is a particular favorite among fans of both the band and the movie alike. And let us not forget about the endless array of merchandise that has sprung up around the Texas Chain Saw Massacre over the years, from t-shirts featuring iconic characters like Leatherface and Grandpa, to replica chainsaws and even a line of horror-themed BP sauces. The film's influence on popular culture is truly unmatched.
Well, said Tom, dear chap, And now, as our time together today comes to an end, I would like to leave you with this final thought. The Texas Chain Saw Massacre is a timeless classic that continues to terrify and fascinate audiences worldwide. Its grimy, visceral horror, iconic characters, and unforgettable moments have cemented it as one of those influential films in cinema history. So my dearest viewers, please comment, subscribe, and like this video. And don't forget to join us next time for another thrilling episode of Tim and Tom's Film Nights. Until then, remember, keep your chainsaw sharp and always wear a mask while carving up your next meal. Good day and good night.